Hey guys, Rich here. Now, one of the biggest struggles we have as composers, and specifically as trailer music composers, is making things sound big enough. I can't tell you how many times, specifically early on in my career, I had the "can you make it sound bigger" feedback from either publishers or clients. And it used to frustrate me so much. But then I stumbled upon the basic idea that helped me. And that's what I'm going to dive into today in this video. Making your orchestra sound bigger at the click of a button. Boom. Here's the basic idea to make your orchestra sound bigger at the click of a button. And I'm going to explain a little bit first, right? So my first mistake was that I just assumed I didn't have enough instruments or enough layers or enough channels. I thought, well, a big orchestra is big, so I have to have lots of instruments. And that was the first train of thought. I just kept layering and layering and adding more and more samples. And it just got muddier and more squashed. And I couldn't, for the life of me, figure out what it was. And then it was actually something that Christian Henson talks about when he started releasing stuff at Spitfire. And this is when it really twigged for me, which was they had this thing about recording the space. Not dry sampling and then adding reverb at the end, but recording the space. And I thought to myself, why does that matter? And I realised because it gives you this sense of scale that the number of instruments doesn't. So if you want to make a solo violin sound bigger and in this bigger space, you put it in a bigger reverb. And this is exactly what happened to me when I produced an orchestral session in London, and we had an orchestra, and the client said, even with the orchestra, the client said, oh, it doesn't sound big enough. And the engineer flicked a switch, and the client went, oh, that's much better. And I ran to the engineer in the session. I was like, Tom, what did you just do? And he's like, man. So we were packing up at the end of the day, and he leaned over to me and said, look, I'll share my tip with you. He said, I doubled the room. I said, what? He said, so I've got the channel. I doubled the room. The channel of mics that recorded the room, the ambient miking, he just said, he took that sound signal and layered it on top, making the room seem even bigger. And that is what made the orchestra sound bigger. And that is what we're going to do right now. You can see here I've got a simple idea. It's in C. I'm going from a C chord to an F minor chord. This is one of my favorite chord progressions. So what we're going to do is, I'm just going to talk about what I've done. It's just two chords, C, F minor, and then an arpeggio around C, F minor. I've got OTT on there. It's not necessary. It's just I quite like the kind of like bite it gives the strings. And I've got Altiverb 7 on there. So I'm going to take both of these off. We're going to have a listen to it beforehand. So what I want to take a look at is I've just gone for a cathedral. Nice big reverb. It's like 10 seconds long. And the first thing I want to highlight to you is I've notched out some of the low so that we're not muddying the mix too much. And I would probably go even further with an EQ after this. And I've done the same with the short strings as well. So let's take a look into the MIDI info. It's just this, and they're swelling in and out. I forgot to add my what's it called? Is it parabolic? I forget the name of it. Curve to my automation. Let's have a listen to what I've got so far. And then we're going to start A-Bing and having a listen to what happens when I flick that switch to make my orchestra sound bigger. This is Jaeger, by the way. Full ensemble patch. Okay, I mean, that sounds pretty good, to be honest with you. I mean, I like it. I've just literally just loaded Jaeger up and bosh, I'm away. Now, let's flick that switch. I'm just going to flick the reverb on so that we can have a listen. Now, the one thing I want to highlight to you is I have pushed the out level up, because what happened in my mix was, because it's about sort of 55% wet dry, it seemed quieter. And I don't want you to confuse quieter with smaller, so I've tried to level it out so that it sounds the same volume-wise. Nice. Can you hear the difference? And if you can't, we're going to switch it on and off during the playing. But adding the reverb, adding the space to the samples gives the sound a sense of scale, a sense of physical space. So it's not just so close mic'd, so you're not hearing just the instruments, you're now hearing the room, in this case, a cathedral. It does so much for the size of your mix. Just be careful about the muddying EQs, etc. I know it's very tempting to have all of the frequencies in the EQ, especially when you're using convolution reverb like that, which is that cathedral is very bass heavy, and it doesn't have to be long either. The reverb doesn't have to be long. It's the size of the room. So if I was to go back into Altiverb, I could take the reverb time down, and it would still have the same effect. Et voila. Okay, so let's have a listen now with the reverb flicking on and off. Nice. Can you hear that? It's a subtle difference, but it makes a huge impact to what you're doing. You know? It reminds me of Grieg, this sequence. It's probably why I love it so much. So if you want to make your orchestra sound bigger at the flick of a switch, it's just a case of loading up a reverb that has a sense of space, that adds that extra dynamic, that extra dimension to what you're doing. It's really important, and it's really easy to do, and it adds a lot to what you're doing, especially if you're very, very clever with your reverb, thinking of different spaces, small, medium, large, and how they are interacting together in your mix. So I know it's one of those things where you're like, oh, serious reverb? Yes, I'm talking about it again. It's so important. Okay, guys, keep learning, keep creating, keep being your awesome self. And remember, when nothing goes right, go left. Go Team Prin.
Amazing.